Deep in the heartlands, where wild horses still roam free, a legend was born. Not gradually, like most tales that gather strength over years of retelling, but in an explosion of hooves and fury that left witnesses breathless. The first time anyone laid eyes on Snowdancer, they knew he was different. His coat wasn't simply white, it gleamed like polished marble under the harsh sun, almost translucent when he moved through morning mist. No one knows where he came from. Some claim he descended from the Spanish Mustangs released centuries ago. Others whisper more fantastical origins, that he emerged from mountain fog like a ghost, untouched by human hands since birth. What everyone agrees on is his temperament. Fierce doesn't begin to describe it. Snowdancer fought capture with a calculated intelligence that borders on supernatural. When Mackenzie's ranch hands finally corralled him after a 3-day pursuit, they celebrated too soon. By sunrise, 3 fence posts were shattered, a stable hand nursed a broken arm, and Snowdancer was gone, leaving nothing but trampled earth and bewildered men in his wake. Word spread quickly across ranching communities. Snowdancer became the challenge every horse trainer secretly dreamed of conquering. Veteran wranglers who'd broken the wildest broncos arrived confident and left humbled. Rodriguez, famous for taming the meanest stallions in 3 states, lasted exactly 8 seconds before being thrown against the corral wall. His collarbone shattered on impact. He never approached another wild horse again. The Blackwood brothers, renowned for their gentle but effective training methods, tracked Snowdancer for weeks before making contact. Their approach was different: patience and respect rather than dominance. For 3 days, it seemed to work. Snowdancer allowed them within 20 feet. On the 4th morning, they found their camp destroyed, water barrels trampled, and no sign of the white stallion except hoofprints heading deeper into unclaimed territory. Each failed attempt only enhanced Snowdancer's reputation. Children were warned to stay clear if they spotted a white horse on the horizon. Ranchers reinforced their corrals just in case he appeared nearby. His name became shorthand for something beautiful but impossible to possess. Perhaps most unsettling were the reports from those who observed him from a distance, running with smaller herds of wild horses. Unlike typical stallions, who maintained dominance through aggression, Snowdancer seemed to lead through some unspoken authority. Other horses yielded to him without confrontation, as if recognizing something ancient and untamed in his blood that commanded their respect. The legend grew until it seemed impossible to separate truth from exaggeration. But one fact remained constant: no human had ever successfully broken Snowdancer's spirit or sat astride his back for more than fleeting seconds. As winter approached and rumors swirled that he'd been captured again, the impossible question emerged: who would be foolish enough to bring the untamable to auction? The announcement appeared in the Willow Creek Gazette on a Tuesday, sandwiched between ads for hay equipment and cattle futures. Just 3 lines of text that sent shockwaves through the equestrian community. White Stallion Snowdancer, captured by Henderson Ranch, auction Saturday. Below these words was a grainy photograph showing a magnificent white horse with eyes that seemed to burn right through the paper. By noon, phones across 3 counties were ringing off their hooks. Henderson was either the bravest rancher alive or the most foolish. How he'd captured the uncapturable horse was anyone's guess, but the real question on everyone's mind was why he'd risk a public auction. Surely he understood the danger. Emerson's auction house hadn't seen this level of interest in decades. Their usual Saturday events attracted local ranchers looking for workhorses or the occasional quarter horse enthusiasts. But this was different. Calls came from as far as Kentucky and Montana. Hotel rooms in Willow Creek, normally vacant except during the annual rodeo, were suddenly booked solid. Old man Emerson himself came out of semi-retirement to oversee preparations. Extra seating was brought in. The ancient PA system, unused for years, was tested and repaired. The holding pens, designed for docile animals awaiting sale, were reinforced with additional posts and thicker planking. Even so, experienced handlers exchanged nervous glances. They'd all heard the stories. Local veterinarian Dr. Mills tried reasoning with Henderson directly. The stallion was too unpredictable, too dangerous for a public venue. The risk to spectators was substantial. Henderson merely smiled and mentioned the expected opening bid. Greed had clouded his judgment, but nobody could deny the financial opportunity. A horse of Snowdancer's reputation might fetch a record price from the right buyer, someone with more money than sense or experience. Meanwhile, word reached beyond traditional equestrian circles. Wildlife photographers wanted to capture images of the legendary stallion. Conservationists prepared protests, arguing that Snowdancer belonged in the wild. Most concerning were the trophy hunters, wealthy collectors who viewed the unrideable horse as the ultimate status symbol. As Saturday approached, the auction house staff worked double shifts. Extra security was hired. Insurance policies were hastily updated. Henderson insisted on bringing Snowdancer in before dawn on auction day to minimize complications. The staff agreed, though many requested positions far from the holding area. What nobody noticed was the quiet woman who visited the auction house on Friday afternoon. She asked no questions, attracted no attention, merely walked to the perimeter of the building, studying its layout with careful eyes before disappearing into the small crowd of early arrivals. By sunset Friday, anticipation had reached fever pitch. Outside the auction house, RVs and trailers filled the parking lot. Inside, Emerson counted advance registrations and smiled at the potential commissions. Henderson, at his ranch 15 miles away, watched his men prepare the reinforced trailer for tomorrow's transport. None of them understood what awaited. The legend of Snowdancer was about to write its most dramatic chapter. Dawn broke cold and clear on auction day. The parking lot already filled beyond capacity as Henderson's reinforced trailer pulled in through the back entrance. 4 men rode in the cab, their faces tight with concentration. 8 more followed in separate vehicles, all experienced handlers, prepared for what many considered an impossible task. The crowd sensed their arrival before seeing it, a ripple of anticipation moving through the gathered onlookers. Then came the sound, rhythmic, metallic booming, that echoed across the grounds as something inside the trailer kicked repeatedly against its walls with devastating force. The handlers moved with military precision, backing the trailer to the specialized unloading chute they'd constructed overnight. Steel pipes formed a narrow corridor leading directly to the reinforced holding pen. Everything had been designed to minimize risk, to contain the uncontainable. Then the trailer door opened, and Snowdancer exploded into view. The crowd collectively gasped. Photographs and rumors hadn't done him justice. Standing nearly 17 hands high, his white coat gleamed almost silver in the morning light, muscles rippling beneath skin that seemed too fine for such power. His mane flew wild as he reared, striking out with front hooves that missed a handler's head by inches. 3 men with catchpoles attempted to guide him down the chute. Snowdancer responded by rearing again, twisting in a space too narrow for such maneuvers, his eyes showing white all around. Those eyes, everyone later agreed they'd never seen such intelligence and fury combined in an animal. He wasn't just fighting capture, he was calculating every move. When he finally entered the holding pen, the handlers quickly secured the gate behind him. Visibly relieved to have barriers between themselves and the stallion, their relief was premature. Snowdancer circled the pen twice, testing its boundaries with methodical precision. Finding no weakness, he backed up to the far side and charged the gate at full speed. The impact reverberated through the auction house foundations. Women screamed. Men stepped back instinctively. The gate held, but barely. For 20 minutes, the white stallion performed a terrifying display of power. He reared to his full height, striking the reinforced walls with precision. He spun and kicked, his hind legs delivering blows that splintered wood despite the metal reinforcements. Between these explosive demonstrations, he would go eerily still, staring directly at specific audience members, as if memorizing their faces. Auction officials huddled in worried consultation. This was beyond what they'd prepared for. Henderson, watching from a safe distance, maintained his confident smile, though it no longer reached his eyes. The scheduled start time came and went. The auctioneer made nervous announcements about delays. Nobody left their seats. Despite the obvious danger, or perhaps because of it, the crowd remained mesmerized by Snowdancer's display. By noon, he showed no signs of tiring. 4 handlers had already been replaced after close calls. The original plan to parade him before bidders was quietly abandoned. He would be sold from the safety of the holding pen, if he could be sold at all. The auctioneer's voice cracked with nervous tension as he announced the opportunity that would determine Snowdancer's value. Any potential buyer could send a representative into the pen to assess the stallion's rideability. The auction house would not be liable for injuries. The crowd murmured, part excitement, part disbelief, that anyone would volunteer. Yet they did. First came Jackson Reeves, national rodeo champion, with 3 buckles to his name. He approached the pen with the swagger of a man accustomed to 8-second victories over the meanest bulls in Texas. Snowdancer watched him enter, unnervingly still, blue eyes tracking every movement. Jackson moved slowly, speaking low and steady as he unfurled his rope. Snowdancer let him approach within 15 feet before exploding into motion. What happened next occurred so quickly, many swore it was choreographed. The stallion feinted left, spun right as Jackson's rope flew, then charged. Jackson barely cleared the fence, his rope left behind, his famous confidence visibly shaken. The crowd's reaction split between nervous laughter and concerned murmurs. Henderson's expression darkened. Without demonstrated rideability, his prize capture would sell for meat price, not the fortune he'd anticipated. Next came Martinez, from the prestigious Willow Wind stables. His approach differed. No rope, just a halter, and decades of experience gentling abused horses. He entered palms forward, stance open, voice melodic. For 3 breathtaking minutes, it seemed to work. Martinez closed the distance to 10 feet, then 8. Snowdancer lowered his head, nostrils flaring. Martinez took another step. The stallion reared suddenly, twisting midair to land facing away, then kicked out with both hind legs. Only Martinez's extraordinary reflexes saved him from devastating impact. He exited ashen-faced, refusing to look back. By now, concerned voices called for the auction's cancellation. This was beyond sport or commerce. It was cruelty to both man and beast. Henderson conferred urgently with the auctioneer, who announced a $1,000 incentive for any successful rider. Wesley Thompson stepped forward, 3rd-generation horse whisperer, whose family name commanded respect throughout the territory. His methods appeared bizarre to the uninitiated. He entered the pen and simply stood, back turned to Snowdancer, seemingly indifferent to the danger. 10 minutes passed in strange tableau. The stallion circled cautiously, periodically stopping to study this human who defied conventional approach. The crowd held its collective breath when Snowdancer finally approached Thompson, close enough that his breath ruffled the man's shirt. Thompson turned slowly, hand outstretched toward the white muzzle. For one heartbeat, connection seemed possible. Then Snowdancer struck, teeth bared. Thompson jerked backward, but wasn't quick enough to escape entirely. His shirt sleeve tore, revealing a shallow gash that immediately bloomed red. Security personnel extracted him, while medics rushed forward. The auction house descended into chaos. Some spectators headed for exits. Others demanded refunds, while hardcore enthusiasts pressed closer, morbidly fascinated. Henderson gesticulated wildly at the auctioneer. who looked increasingly trapped between commerce and conscience. Amidst the confusion, few noticed the plain-dressed woman slipping along the edge of the crowd, moving with quiet determination toward the auctioneer's podium. She appeared like a shadow between shouting men, moving against the flow of the retreating crowd. Nothing about her commanded attention. Faded denim jacket, practical boots worn at the heels, hair pulled back beneath a weathered hat. No makeup, no jewelry, no visible credentials marking her as someone of importance. Yet something in her movement, fluid, unhurried, absolutely certain, caused people to step aside unconsciously. The auction manager didn't notice her approach, preoccupied with the escalating disaster before him. Snowdancer had worked himself into a new frenzy, charging the perimeter of his enclosure with such force that metal supports groaned audibly. Henderson was shouting about contractual obligations, while safety personnel attempted to clear the immediate area. She touched the manager's elbow lightly. He turned, irritated by the interruption, then paused at the calm intensity in her eyes. She leaned forward, speaking so quietly he had to bend down despite the surrounding chaos. His expression shifted from dismissal to disbelief, then to desperate hope. A brief exchange, barely 30 seconds, ended with his reluctant nod. The manager raised his hands for attention, though few noticed amidst the commotion. The woman didn't wait for formal introduction. She simply moved toward the pen with the same unhurried confidence, slipping past a security guard, too distracted by the stallion's display to notice her passing. Only when she reached the gate did the crowd begin to register her presence. A ripple of awareness spread outward, conversation dying as heads turned. Someone shouted a warning. Another called for security. The woman acknowledged none of it, her focus entirely on the white stallion, who now stood absolutely still at the far side of the enclosure, ears forward, attention locked on this new development. For nearly a minute, they simply regarded each other, woman and horse, separated by 30 feet of trampled earth. No movement, no sound. The audience, moments before demanding action, fell silent, as if witnessing something sacred. The woman's hand moved to the gate latch. Henderson lurched forward, suddenly aware of what she intended. Two handlers intercepted him, unexpectedly blocking his path. The auction manager signaled security to stand down. Whatever the mysterious woman had whispered had carried sufficient authority to pause the proceedings. She stepped into the enclosure without hesitation, closing the gate behind her. No safety line, no protective gear, no visible tools of horse management. Several women gasped. A child began crying somewhere in the back rows. Medical personnel moved closer to the fence, grimly anticipating necessity. Snowdancer's posture changed subtly, head lowering slightly, weight shifting to his back legs in preparation for movement. Everyone who knew horses recognized the stance. He was preparing to charge. The woman did the unthinkable. She turned her back to the stallion and walked to the center of the pen. There she stopped, shoulders relaxed, hands loose at her sides. Not challenging, not retreating, simply being. The crowd collectively held its breath. The stallion's ears flicked forward, then back, then forward again. His nostrils flared wide, drawing in her scent across the distance. Then, to the astonishment of every witness, Snowdancer took one deliberate step forward. Time seemed suspended in the auction house. As the woman remained motionless in the center of the pen, Snowdancer took another step forward, then another, his movements cautious yet deliberate. The crowd watched in stunned silence, many holding phones aloft to record what they assumed would be another violent rejection. The woman made her first movement, then subtle, almost imperceptible. Her shoulders rotated slightly, not directly facing the stallion, yet not completely turned away. An invitation without demand. Snowdancer paused, head lowering then raising as he processed this unfamiliar language. When the woman finally turned to face him, She did so with a fluidity that seemed to flow like water. No sudden movements, no direct stare. Her hands remained open at her sides, palms slightly forward. Snow Dancer's ears flickered rapidly, processing information beyond human perception. She began a strange dance then, shifting her weight in patterns that seemed random to observers, but carried clear meaning to the white stallion. She would move slightly left, pause, then right, forward 2 steps, then 1 back. Each movement elicited corresponding adjustments from Snow Dancer. They were conversing in a primal language of space, energy, and intention. The transformation in the stallion became evident first in his eyes. The wild, rolling white began to recede. His breathing, previously harsh and rapid, steadied into deeper rhythms. His tail, which had been lashing frantically during earlier confrontations, now moved in slower, more deliberate sweeps. Henderson watched in disbelief as 15 minutes became 20, then 30. Snow Dancer continued his careful approach toward the woman, stopping occasionally to process, then advancing again. The distance between them gradually closed. 20 feet, 15, 10. At 8 feet away, the stallion stopped. Traditional horse handlers in the audience tensed, recognizing this as decision distance, the point where flight or fight would be determined. The woman did something extraordinary then. She sank slowly to her knees, making herself smaller, more vulnerable. Collective gasps escaped from the crowd. Even those with no equine experience understood the significance. She was placing absolute trust in an animal that had injured every human who approached him. For nearly 2 minutes, neither moved. Then Snow Dancer lowered his great head and extended his muzzle toward her. Their first contact was a whisper, his nostrils brushing the air inches from her outstretched palm. The woman remained perfectly still as Snow Dancer explored her scent. His head bobbed slightly, processing information beyond human understanding. Then came the moment that would later be described as miraculous. The stallion stepped forward and voluntarily pressed his forehead against her hand. Something profound passed between them in that touch. Observers would later struggle to describe it. Not dominance overcome, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. The stallion's entire posture transformed, muscles relaxing, head lowering to the woman's level. She rose slowly, her hand maintaining contact, sliding gently along his neck. For the first time, sounds of wonder rather than fear echoed through the auction house. Phones recorded furiously as the woman stood beside Snow Dancer, her fingers lightly resting on his withers, his body now angled protectively toward her rather than poised for escape. The legend that couldn't be touched now leaned into a stranger's hand, his transformation complete and undeniable. The auction hall fell into reverent silence as the woman slowly circled Snow Dancer, her hand never breaking contact with his gleaming coat. The stallion's eyes, previously wild with fear and rage, now followed her with an attentiveness that bordered on devotion. She paused at his shoulder, her fingers tracing invisible patterns that seemed to communicate more than words ever could. Without rope or saddle, without bit or bridle, she placed one hand gently on his withers. Snow Dancer stood perfectly still, a statue carved from living marble. When she gathered his mane in her fingers, he lowered himself slightly, an offering that drew audible gasps from the crowd. In one fluid motion, she swung herself onto his bare back. For 3 heartbeats, nobody breathed. The memory of previous riders' violent rejections remained fresh in everyone's mind. Yet Snow Dancer stood calm, his ears flickering occasionally toward the woman as if awaiting guidance. She straightened slowly on his back, settling her weight with deliberate care. Then, with the lightest pressure from her legs, she asked rather than commanded. Snow Dancer responded immediately, walking forward in a smooth, collected stride that showcased his natural grace. Together they circled the pen once, twice, their movements so harmonious They appeared to share a single mind. The auctioneer approached the microphone. His voice hushed with wonder as he identified her at last. Dr. Catherine Winters, legendary equine behaviorist who'd spent 15 years studying wild horse herds in the most remote regions of Nevada and Montana. Not a trainer in the conventional sense, but a translator of equine language, developer of methods based on herd dynamics rather than human dominance. As she guided Snowdancer through the pen with invisible cues, Catherine explained her approach to the spellbound audience. The stallion had never been broken because he couldn't be broken. His spirit was too integral to his being. What he needed wasn't submission but partnership, not control but understanding. Henderson stood slack-jawed at the edge of the pen, his dreams of record-breaking profits dissolving before his eyes. The auction manager approached him with paperwork in hand. Catherine had submitted the minimum bid before entering the pen, a bid that would now be accepted given her extraordinary demonstration. As Catherine prepared to lead Snowdancer from the auction house, she revealed her true purpose. The white stallion wouldn't be ridden for sport or bred for profit. He would return to protected land, joining a conservation program where his bloodline could strengthen wild herds increasingly threatened by habitat loss. Catherine would continue studying him, learning his language, sharing his wisdom with a world that had nearly forgotten how to listen to creatures other than themselves. Snowdancer walked willingly beside her as they exited, his head held high, no rope connecting them, but a trust more binding than any physical restraint. The crowd parted in silent respect, many reaching for their phones to follow the conservation program Catherine mentioned. The legend of the unrideable horse hadn't ended that day. It had transformed into something far more powerful, not a story of conquest, but of connection, not of breaking spirits, but of honoring them. If you've been moved by Snowdancer's journey from feared beast to conservation ambassador, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the true spirit of horses, both wild and domestic. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we explore another remarkable bond between humans and these magnificent creatures.